SUNY in the hot seat in Albany, taking questions during a state budget hearing today. Chancellor John King was there, answering those questions about SUNY's overall money picture. Does it support SUNY Potsdam? And what about funding for community colleges? Here's 7 News reporter Chad Charette.
The SUNY system received an additional $163 million in state funding last year, and another proposed $54 million on top of that this year. But SUNY Chancellor John B. King tells state lawmakers costs to run the system are up $86 million from last year.
We either need increases in direct state support or tuition increases. But we need a revenue source. Otherwise, when you look out 10 years, we have a $1 billion deficit.
Also discussed, SUNY Potsdam. State Assemblyman Scott Gray asking Chancellor King to affirm his support of the struggling campus.
I've got a community that sits here with tremendous uncertainty because of prison closures and the uncertainty of college campuses. So are we committed to making sure that these college campuses do not fail?
The chancellor says a plan to budget is a 2,500 student campus instead of 4,000 is the right path.
Potsdam, we are committed to Potsdam's long-term success, and the plan in place there is designed to ensure its long-term success.
Assemblyman Robert Smullen, who represents areas just south of the North Country, brought up the issue of funding community colleges, saying funding is staying the same.
So flat in an inflationary period is a cut. And I'm very concerned about funding our community colleges because those are the gateways for many students in rural areas.
Chancellor King claims he's open to finding a solution.
We are eager to have a fuller conversation with you and your colleagues about how we might enhance community college funding, specifically around workforce needs.
The final state budget has to be passed by April 1st. Chad Charette, 7 News.